My name is Eugenia Maresch, Eugenia Maresch, we pronounce it in Polish. That's my married name. My name is Polnik. And that's a family who lived in the northeast part of Poland. And I was born in Postawy in 1935, so I'm getting old now. Now, I was only 5 when the war broke out, so obviously I do not remember much. I do have memories, sort of instances of home, Christmas time, dolls, home, horses and dogs around me. So it was an idyllic beginning of my childhood. Now, my oldest sister was sent to Vilno, to the Nazaretan convent for girls, because she was nearly 18 then. So when we were woken up at middle of the night by the Valivade people to get ready, we're going away somewhere, a long journey from here, she was left behind, so she didn't know.
Can you repeat which day? Do you remember?
Oh, it's on the 10th of February 1940. So she was left behind. Now there was another sister, which is 10 years older than me, and brother, 3 years older than me. I was the little one. And so this is how we evacuated. Now, father was in the army and he wasn't with us at home. So he was imprisoned separately and we didn't know where he was. It's only when we arrived in the Altaïski Krai, which is Novosibirskaya Oblast, far away, very near the border of China. And we've heard from him that he's imprisoned and he's sentenced to death, na rozstrzał. Now, my mother and my sister were employed in the forestry. So they were chopping forests, trees, whatever, for what purpose, I don't know. It's only to earn bread. You didn't have any money. It was only bread, and that was perhaps 400 grams of bread per day. So this is how we started. I was taken to a sort of like a primary school, Russian primary school, because the only reason for me going to that primary school was that we were given 1 hot meal a day. Now, I didn't learn much. When you're 5, you don't really remember, so it was really almost Polish, but a little bit of Russian words which still linger in my memory. Now, we learned later that my father was in Barnaul prison camp. And it's only in 1941 with the 1941, this was the Majski-Sikorski agreement, whereby the ex-soldiers, Polish soldiers, were released from prison. And the families were allowed to be freer, not to be sort of cooked up in one little space. So I saw my father, as I do remember, for the first time after imprisonment, without the front teeth. They were knocked down by the NKVD people who interrogated him and beat him up. And I do remember he was hunched up and I watched him. He was eating dry bread and he had his hand, always his hand, just under his chin, so all the crumbs that perhaps would fall on the floor he could actually eat. So that was the situation.
And that
this is how I remember.
Which you have of your father.
Yes.
Which year was it and where was it?
No, it must have been sort of middle of 41. I think it must have been released sort of July, August, because I do remember it was summer
So
still.
where were you? I mean, where did you meet him? Which
In
place?
Altajski Krai, in the we call it, we can actually say it now, it's a place where it wasn't sort of like, how can I compare? It was like a gulag, only it was for women and children mostly, and perhaps older people, like 70 or 80-year-old, parents or grandparents. So in effect, you were under control of the NKVD. You weren't allowed to go out of the rim of the Bolshevik. Now, I do remember it was Zminogorsk. Now, it had a very short but very hot summers and very long snowy winters, and they're sort of minus 30, minus 40 degrees. And I do remember being very hungry, and I was crying with that.
So, which year did you know that you are going somewhere else? Which is like, did you know of India? Did you know where you were going?
No, nobody knew where we're going, who will take us. We knew that probably about 70,000 of Polish ex-servicemen were released. Some didn't manage to arrive at the certain points, certain centers of recruitments. But about 50,000 managed to be evacuated from Russia, from Kazakhstan, to be honest, to Persia, and then eventually to Iraq for the maneuvers. And that was the formation of the Second Corps, the Polish Army and the Second Corps, under the guidance and commander General Anders. Now, the British were not that keen for the evacuation of civilians. They say, we are willing to donate and also work with the charitable institutions to give them help, medical, clothing, food, whatever. But England wasn't keen to take the refugees. Neither was America, or Australia, or South Africa. Smuts was in charge then. Now in England, there are 70,000 of prisoners of war, Italians and Germans. So they had to feed them. So they said, we cannot accept any more refugees. Now, at the moment, we'll just leave it at that. We shall help them. But time was pressing. Anders decided that with the Polish army, he's going to take eventually in batches certain amount of civilians, wives and children. Among those, there are quite a number of orphans who had no mother because died, or father because he was still probably in prison, or in Kamchatka or Hangilsk, I don't know where. So there was a number of children who had nobody, or perhaps had one very poor or ill aunt or perhaps a grandmother. So from the humanitarian point of view, England had to think what to do with the refugees. Now, the British ambassador in Persia didn't know anything about civilians coming. He knew that the army was coming along, and there were very short periods of stay in Persia because they were already going to Iraq and Palestine and later on elsewhere. And so that was quite a problem for the British government. And this is when your James Saheb comes in. Now he, with other gentlemen, Sir, I've forgotten his proper name, but I've got written it down somewhere. They both they were delegates for India in a war cabinet. And when this subject of refugees, to rescue the refugees, especially Polish refugees from Russia, came up, they agreed that perhaps the best way and the shortest way to help the refugees is to take them within the British colonies. And that's Africa and India. That is the nearest. And so James Saheb said, I will take as much as I can under my care, but not thousands and thousands and thousands. So eventually they thought that perhaps we can actually send some help first of all and pick up the orphans, the little ones who needed help. And this is how this expedition to Kazakhstan to pick up those, they said originally 500, but there were more than that. But they picked up 120 odd only, the first lot. And then they were moved to Chela camp. And then they went back for the others.
But nobody said, I don't think in the film we said thousands and thousands.
No, but the documents are.
No,
now,
they
nobody
say
actually
about 1,000. I mean, it
Yes.
was not even 1,000.
No. They didn't know themselves how many are still waiting to be evacuated from Russia.
So,
Now, there were 32,000 already in Persia
okay.
in 43, 44.
Okay.
You see? So they had to accommodate them somewhere. So first of all, they went through Karachi and the first lot went to Uganda, Kenya, Zambia, and about 2,000 only in south of Africa. So they were settled there, and then the last 5,000 went to India. Prior to that, we are going back a little ahead, when decision was made to go and pick up some orphanages, and that was the small groups. The documents actually state that James Saheb agreed to give the land for the building of the camp, and also to bring the water and electricity. Now it took some time, so the children stayed in Chela, I think, and Bandra, I think, somewhere, and then they were moved properly once it was finished. Now I myself, with my mother and my sister.
So where was your brother?
My brother was sent to Africa. Would you believe it? That was a partition of families. I mean, families were parting. Nobody actually knew.
Who partitioned them?
Well, by themselves. They're simply lost. And he was taken care and put in the orphanage. And the orphanage first thing was taken to Uganda. And he was in Uganda and we didn't know where he was. And we thought that he's perished.
Let me understand. You in Siberia, you were with your sister and
Yes.
mother and brother.
And brother,
And
yes.
when amnesty happened and y'all were let free, then your brother somehow went to the orphanage.
No. We were stationed near the Polish army. Now we couldn't stay together. So there was a separate camp place for the civilians. Right? Now, gradually, they were forming groups, a list of people who was going to be evacuated. And they said, well, the first will go, the children. So he was actually enrolled as a child. But mother was thinking that eventually in Persia, in Pahlavi, we shall meet and unite. But we didn't. It's just as simple as that. And my mother didn't know. It's only Red Cross, the International Red Cross, told us while we were in India that he's alive and he is in a camp in Uganda.
But was it International Red Cross or Polish Red Cross?
No, International Red Cross.
Because in the book Poles in India, we tried to find a lot about what, even I asked Teresa,
Yeah.
what did International Red Cross is very keen to know that what was International Red Cross involved in, or any, I mean, whatever.
Yes,
So I
looking
saw that
looking
it
for
was all
people. Yes,
PCK.
looking for people were international.
Oh,
Now there was a delegate, the Polish delegate of the Red Cross, International Red Cross. They called Polish delegate of the International Red Cross. There's only one International Red Cross, and there were delegates, British Red Cross, Polish Red Cross, etc. Now he was stationed in, as far as I remember, Geneva, I think. He stayed in Geneva, and anything that he could actually help to arrange internationally, it went through him. So I mean, if the families were parted, and we didn't know whether you're alive or not, the International checked the list of people who were evacuated. So they had to first of all to check the lists of various, groups that were evacuated. So it took some time eventually.
so your brother went to Uganda,
Yes, he was sent.
and
He was sent.
you, your mother, and your sister.
He was only 8 or 9. I mean, he wasn't. He was a child, really.
So,
Yeah.
who all came to Valivade? I mean, in your family?
No, there's only 3. My sister, and she was 16 by then, and she went to St. Joseph's School, the Roman Catholic convent school, to study. And I think she was preparing for a sort of like a secretarial course or something like that. And she
Since
started
social
learning.
schools, you're talking about Panchgani?
Yes,
She went to Panchgani?
yes, Panchgani.
Okay. So, you were at what age when you arrived at Valivade?
7, I think.
Okay.
7, because I remember I went to the first Holy Communion, and that's 7 or 8. Perhaps I was 8. Can't remember that exactly.
So, tell me about your experience now in Valivade.
Now, after the turmoil of this journey from Russia to Persia, and then we're taken by trucks to India. Some people traveled by sea to Karachi and then Bombay. We traveled on probably the same route as the first expedition that went to Russia with food, and so this was a peaceful heaven, because the sun was shining all day, huge sky, and in the evening you had a terrible noise, absolutely wonderful noise of frogs, and the little we call it świetliki, which was forgotten now the proper name for it, that shine in the bushes. And we used to sort of gather them and play with them. We didn't have any toys, so I do remember we started making from a little cardboard, a little doll, and then little dresses and things like that. We used to dress them. Now, we also ate mangoes for the first time in my life, and banana. I didn't know them before, and that was heavenly as well. Now, the quality of those fruit, the mangoes, was low. It had a lot of hair, not a lot of the proper fruit around it. So we used to eat it and suck it, and then you had it's lovely, about a good 2 or 3 inches of this hair hanging around. And that was our children. We used to play. How many children we used to have? Yeah, it was lovely. It was absolutely heaven. Long days and long evenings, and I didn't like the monsoon. When the monsoon arrived, it was really sort of very,
What do
very
you
poor.
remember about when you look back at Valivade when you were a child? You went to school, right?
Yes, I went straight to school. Yeah, straight to school, and I did enjoy it. There's a class of about probably 30 of us, and I liked school because I've never seen actually a proper book. And I was given, there were no notebooks. I think we were given little slates, and we used to sort of write alphabet, etc. So that was very primitive, but lovely.
And your sister went to, she was 16, as you say.
Mhm.
So was she into any vocational training? Because from what I read in the book,
Mhm.
The Polish government had said that everybody who was able to, they must be empowered. They should be able to earn.
Work, yes, and earn, yes.
So I would like you to talk about that. Was your sister doing that? Was your mother? Was your friend?
Well, because she was still at school, and usually when you're up to 18, your schooling age is over, and you're looking for a job or you're going for further studies. Now with Jadzia, that was her name. With Jadzia, we call her Nella because the sisters call her Nella. Jadwiga was a very difficult name to pronounce for them. So Nella with double L of all places. It was very curious. And now I think they're all prepared for a job, to be honest, because I mean, they couldn't be taught in Polish. That was an English curriculum, and the language was very, very, sort of poor. They started from the door, the floor, please sit down, etc. So very sort of you start with very, very limited vocabulary, but they managed, for typing, for instance, or the shorthand typing as well. So I think the girls were ready. There must have been about 15 of them, not many. I mean, 15 out of 5,000 people is not a lot. I don't know why she was chosen, to be honest, but perhaps she was lucky, or perhaps they had an external examination to find whether your aptitude is good enough to have an English education. But she stayed up to about 1947, when we eventually departed for England.
So what was she working as?
When she arrived, she was working as a shop assistant. And then we bought a farm in Devon.
No, I'm talking
in 1948.
In Valivade. Your sister,
You're going back to Valivade again.
I am in Valivade. The film is about Valivade.
Mm.
I am talking in Valivade. Okay, let's stop.
No, she didn't work.
Okay.
My mother didn't work.
Okay.
I mean, there was no work for them. That's the whole point.
No, because I read in the book, and also there are pictures of people, either they were doll making or they were...
Or they were sewing, yes.
Yeah.
They were sort of like a home industry, really.
Yeah.
For instance, a hairdresser or a dressmaker. Yes, but I mean, you would go and I'll ask him, could you possibly, make me a skirt or a blouse or whatever? And that person, actually, you brought your own material. You bought it on a market in Kolhapur, and then you take it to that lady, and she would actually make you a lovely dress,
So
whatever.
Do you remember the local interaction, the local Indians?
There was very little, because the English said there's no communication, it mustn't be. This is a closed camp, because there was no connections. People who had connections with the British were the administration, only administration. Now, people like Teresa was mentioning, they were allowed to do the work, the menial work, the physical work. And they were paid by us, for instance, like cleaning or bringing water, or selling ice cream or lemonade, whatever. they were allowed, they had to be registered there obviously, and they were allowed to bring their goods to the camp. Now at first I do remember, because my mother was saying that we needed a permission, a written permission from the Commander Yageo, who was in charge of the camp, if you wanted to go to Kolhapur. And you were given that you must come back at 10 o'clock at the latest. So you're given permission, but you're given the time to come back. It's just like a strict household.
So why did people go to Kolhapur?
No, to see the town. It was something that, you know, it was so totally different. We're in the middle of nowhere, just the barracks, you know, and they were sort of made out of plaited bamboos. Yes, well, I mean, when you're a child, you only sort of mix with your group of children there at school, or the because there were 3 schools. There was the preliminary school, there was the gymnasium, and then there was Lyceum, sort of like an upper 6th school. And then there was also a school of, they called Gospodarczy, which is like a home industry. You learn how to sew, how to, you know, to cut or
And then there was a hospital.
And there was a hospital, and there was also an orphanage, because whatever couldn't go to Cella or Valivade came to us. I had severe anemia, and I was sent to Panjgani for about a month with other children, and just to change of air probably. Now my mother was ill, I do remember. It's called simply a sort of explanation that she caught an amoeba of some sort, so her stomach wasn't functioning properly. And she'd been taken to a hospital, but that was already prepared. That was on the 4th region, way back nearer the river. And that was fully equipped. And we had 2 Indian doctors. One came from Pune, I think, the other from Bombay. And we had a Polish doctor as well, so and a dentist as well. So I mean, we were very well equipped. I do not remember anybody staying initially. Probably they were taken to Kolhapur. Anybody who needed treatment.
Tell me something about. You were saying that the hospital was near the river.
No, it's on the south. North of the river. It's not that. I used to live in block number 12. Which was at the front almost, administration block, and then 1, 2, 3, etc. So, and then block rayon number 2 was further along on the left, 3 and 4, and behind 4 was the hospital.
Okay, so near your barrack there was.
I wish I had.
No, I will make you do the drawing. No problem.
No. I'll bring you a map. It'll be better.
No, I want to know. I know there was a Panchganga river. There still is. So was the barrack was quite far away from the river, wasn't it? Or was
Yes, it wasn't by the river. I didn't say by the river, but in that direction.
Okay.
I do
and
remember
the
that
hospital
one.
was also on the other side of the river.
No.
Okay.
In the north of the river,
In the
not
north
inside.
of the river. Okay, so the hospital which you're talking about, was it made by the Polish authorities for y'all only?
Yes, it was made by the Polish Red Cross, and it was called Red Cross Hospital. And that was on the instigation and by the Bombay Polish delegates of the Polish government in London.
No,
As a child, I felt it was such a different country to whatever I already seen. I don't remember much in Poland. I do have a memory, but not much. When you're 5, you're still sort of holding onto your mother's skirt. There's tremendous grudgery and deprivation in Russia. No food, no schooling, no away from the world, the rest of the world. We didn't know what was going on, whether we are nearing China or we're going to be deported into India. Well, I didn't know where India was at all. It's only when you arrived and it hit you. When we arrived at Karachi, I do remember, everything was dry. It was dry season. There was not a blade of green grass, and a lot of sand. And I thought, well, I wasn't impressed. My first impression wasn't impressed. It's only when we were taken into Valivade camp and we started desperately, and I do remember my mother planting a lot of flowers, and we call it povoi, the one that sort of goes round. It grows very, very quickly. So we had a veranda and all that greenery around us. So it was like home, first proper home since we left in 1940. So that was a comforting feeling. Now, others, yes, I do. I do remember the trip into Kolhapur, and I saw, cows wandering about, and everything was so different, and the colours, beautiful colours of saris, and you couldn't draw your attention to it. So everything was different. Everything was attractive, I should imagine. I know that my sister, when she was coming over to see us from Panjgani, and she used to bring records, but they were sort of Bakelite records, and you had little needles that you wind the gramophone with. And she used to bring jitterbugs and, there's very, very lively music. And we never had it before outside. Inside the Valivade, we were sort of not hearing that sort of music. And I said, well, it comes from America. Do you know where America is? No, I don't know where America. Well, all that music, it's all lively and, sort of. And so it was lovely. I do remember that. In actual fact, I've read a document where they say that there are some people who are either dementia, and they were sort of misbehaving or stealing or something like that, and they had to be retained somewhere, etc. And then it says about these two women, and then there was in a little bracket 4, some of those written 4, that got married to the Indians. And what shall we do with them? Shall we allow them to stay in India, or if they wish, will they go to England? Now, she was an orphan, so she didn't have anybody in the Polish army. Now, anybody who didn't have any uncle or fathers could not be accepted. The British would not accept them as a dependent. And they had no choice. No, they had a choice. Either to go back to Poland, whatever situation is there, or you can actually go and stay in Africa. And a lot of people went to South Africa, to Cape Town and Durban, places like that where they have the means of earning. And quite a lot of Valivade people went to Africa. Older, I mean, not children like me, but I mean older children when you're sort of 14, 15, 16 or 18 even. They were encouraged to write to people who didn't have their families. They were left in Poland, and they sort of found themselves in Iraq or in Palestine, ready for a big battle in Italy. So this is how they, she just wrote, she didn't know where it's going to be. So my sister was encouraged to write to anybody, an unknown person. And that letter was given to a group of young soldiers who didn't have any mail. And it's just by chance. It's you answer to this girl, answer to this girl, and answer to the girl. And the letter that she's written was given to Mirosław. I liked him very much. And they started corresponding. Not during the war when he was in Italy, but after the battle, he wrote again, and they started a frequent correspondence. So when we came back in 1947 to England, he was already mobbed and working in Yeovil in Somerset. And when he knew that we were back in England, he came over, introduced himself, and you know, they went to a park and they were holding hands, and I said, well, she's found somebody and he's found her. And they got married. They got married eventually in 1948, a year later. Well, if the Valivade didn't happen, that means I would have stayed in Zminogorsk, probably. Stayed and worked very hard, no education, nothing. Probably married a Russian or Kazakh person. I don't know. I just cannot imagine what would it be if I stayed in Russia, like some people did. Now in Irkutsk, there are still some Poles still living in there. They cling to the language, they cling to the religion. Staying in India meant quite. Now I can actually appreciate more about India and what it gave to me, from the point of view that it enlarged my thinking, my tolerance even, because this is how I actually become tolerant, because I've been through starvation and poverty, and I've seen starvation and poverty. So I was very much into empathy, even now, with the Indian people. So, in a way, I've stayed only there for 5 years, right? I'm part of India. I feel it as though part of me is there, still there. So it's a very unusual feeling, and that's why we have set up this association, because it meant as though we're still together. These are Poles in India. I do remember I was the first one to depart from Bombay in July. That was the first expedition of Poles back to England. Not back, but I mean to England.
Okay, so
and we arrived in the 2nd or 3rd of September, and it took about a good 5 weeks of journey. So I have a feeling that I have missed that. I must have been, otherwise I don't remember.
Yeah, you left
being
in
present.
July, so the
We left in
independence was
July.
in August.
Well then.
Yeah, no, I was also.
We've learned about the assassination of Gandhi while we're still in a camp in England.
Tell me, why didn't you go back to Poland?
Now, the eastern part of Poland was taken over by the Russians, and the Curzon line was taken over by the Soviet Socialist Republic. So there's no way we could actually go back home, because that's not Poland. That was part of Belarusian eventually. So I went to Postavi quite recently to see my place of birth, because I didn't have a birth certificate, none of them. And we traveled the world without the birth certificate. I went there and thinking that I shall have a copy. And I asked the lady who was in the office there if I could have a copy of my birth certificate. And she said no, she's not allowed to give the birth certificates. You have to deal with it through the Belarusian embassy in London. And that's the procedure. You know why? Because they wanted not to let the other people know how many Poles used to live in that part of the world before the war, right? So they said that was, for ages and ages, that was Belarusian land. So anyway, I said, well, I've lived for 70 odd years without the birth certificate. I can live without it. So I haven't got it.
How did you meet your brother?
Oh, here in England.
Okay, and
In 40, he came over in 1948.
How did you find out about him?
Oh, we correspond now. When we knew where he was in Uganda, we used to write a letter to him, and he used to sort of write back that he's seen a crocodile and he's, you know, whatever he's doing there with other boys. So we knew. And then when it was time for him to be put on a list of people to join the family in England, he came over at the end of 48, I don't remember. Oh, it was very tearful. The sight was absolutely horrendous.
I would like you to start the answer by saying that in the year this much, I went back to Valivade, and then talk about how you felt.
Well, about 10 years ago, even earlier, I can't remember the day, precise a year, but it was our first trip organized, about 30 odd, 32 or 34 of us, organized trip back to India, back to Valivade and Kolhapur. And then we traveled as a tourist, so we went to Delhi and Agra and other beautiful places. The place that I've never actually seen, staying for 5 years in India, I haven't been outside Valivade. So it was a revelation how beautiful was other parts of India.
Tell me about your memory.
It was a pure devastation. The camp was overtaken by refugees from Pakistan after the partition, so they must have stayed for years and years there. Not a blade of grass there. Dilapidated, converted housing. Some were extended, the verandas were built as part of the rooms, and not a sign. It was horrible. I thought, why can't they sort of keep the original and look after it? Now there was a school, a very dilapidated state, but it was still used by those children. And we've met those children. And we brought photographs, how we were in the schoolroom then, all those years back, 60 years ago. I think it must have been about 50. That was to mark the 50th anniversary of our parting.